And after we win 4 more years, we'll ask for maybe another 4 or so. I've raised a lot of money for the next race that I assume I can't use for myself, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't know. I think I'm not allowed to run again. I'm not sure. Am I allowed to run again? But I'll tell you, I have had more people ask me to have a 3rd term, which is in a way a 4th term because the other election, the 2020 election was totally rigged.
The Oval Office has a new occupant, or rather an old one, who's rewritten the political playbook. In 2024, Donald Trump accomplished what political scientists once considered nearly impossible in modern America, resurrecting a defeated presidency from the ashes of electoral defeat. After his loss in 2020, Trump didn't fade away. He orchestrated the political equivalent of rising from the dead, capturing the Republican nomination with a commanding 3/4 of primary votes before reclaiming the White House with 312 electoral votes. Trump's second win isn't just a comeback, it's a realignment of what Americans thought was politically possible. Only one other man in 250 years of American democracy has pulled off this Phoenix Act: Grover Cleveland, who in 1892 defeated Benjamin Harrison after Harrison had unseated him 4 years earlier. Cleveland's victory after defeat might have seemed like a historical footnote until Trump transformed it into a potential template. While Cleveland quietly accepted his place in history's 2-term club, Trump has repeatedly hinted at something far more provocative.
We start at 16, we go to 20, we go to 24. Did you see it? Then it says 28. 32, 36, 40, 44.
The murmurs about a potential 3rd Trump term didn't stay in the realm of casual speculation or late-night TV fodder. The question broke into the marble halls of official Washington when Trump's Attorney General nominee, Pam Bondi, found herself in the constitutional hot seat during her Senate confirmation hearing.
A simple question of constitutional interpretation: is President-elect Trump eligible to run for another term as president in 2028?
No, Senator, not unless they change the Constitution.
Thank you.
Buckle up, because we're about to embark on a constitutional odyssey. We'll unravel the historical precedent of the 2-term tradition that Washington established and FDR shattered, uncover the shadowy pathways to the Oval Office without winning a single presidential vote, and explore constitutional trapdoors and legal loopholes that could, theoretically, allow a determined president to circumvent what many Americans consider an ironclad rule. Some of these scenarios sound like political science fiction. Others have already happened in American history. All of them expose the fascinating fragility of a system we thought was bulletproof. The question isn't just whether Trump could serve a 3rd term, it's whether the 22nd Amendment is as unbreakable as we've always assumed. The chess game begins now. When America cast off the shackles of monarchy, it faced an unprecedented question. Who would lead this experiment in democracy? The answer was obvious: General George Washington, the towering figure who had outmaneuvered the world's mightiest empire. But what happened next would shape American democracy more profoundly than any battle Washington ever fought. During a portrait session in London, King George III, the very monarch America had rebelled against, reportedly posed a question that revealed the monarch's blind spot. He asked painter Benjamin West what Washington would do after winning the war and presumably taking power. "They say he will return to his farm," West replied. The king was stunned. In a world of lifelong monarchs, the concept of voluntarily relinquishing power was revolutionary. "If he does that," the astonished king declared, "he will be the greatest character of the age." Washington didn't just return to his farm after the war. As his second term drew to a close in 1796, he gathered the nation around him through his farewell address and declared he would step aside. No 3rd term. no president for life, no American monarchy. Thomas Jefferson, after completing his own second term, followed Washington's example. This two-term tradition stood. Some presidents tried for a third term, Ulysses S. Grant and Theodore Roosevelt among them. But party leaders or voters always enforced the unwritten rule. The tradition seemed unbreakable until it wasn't. Enter Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the man who shattered Washington's unwritten commandment. Taking office amid the ruins of the Great Depression, FDR didn't just expand presidential power, he revolutionized it, implementing sweeping New Deal programs that fundamentally rewired America's relationship with government. But it was his unprecedented electoral dominance that truly rattled the republic. 4 elections, 4 victories. While his predecessors had voluntarily stepped aside after 8 years, Roosevelt kept winning. His attempt to pack the Supreme Court by adding justices friendly to his agenda triggered the first warnings. Then came his third election victory in 1940 and fourth in 1944 as World War II raged. Whispers of American Caesar and fears of perpetual presidency began to circulate in Washington's corridors. Nature imposed its own term limit when Roosevelt passed away in office in April 1945. But the constitutional damage was done. What was once sacred tradition had been proven penetrable. Congress moved with historic speed to patch the breach in democracy's hull. Amending the Constitution requires clearing nearly impossible hurdles, 2/3 of both congressional chambers plus 3/4 of states. Yet the 22nd Amendment rocketed through this obstacle course with remarkable velocity. On February 27, 1951, Minnesota became the 36th state to ratify, permanently enshrining the 2-term limit into constitutional law. The message was clear: never again would America risk the concentration of power that comes with a perpetual presidency. The constitutional door to unlimited terms had been slammed shut, locked, and welded closed, or so we thought. With the 22nd Amendment now constitutional bedrock, the presidency acquired an expiration date. The first commander-in-chief forced to reckon with this new reality was Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 5-star general who had orchestrated victory in Europe only to find himself constrained by civilian law. Eisenhower didn't mince words. The amendment, he warned, crippled presidential influence by transforming every second-term president into an instant lame duck. With characteristic military logic, he proposed a counteroffensive. What is good for the president might very well be good for the Congress. Ronald Reagan went even further during his conversation with interviewer David Frost, openly advocating repeal of the amendment.
I would like to start a movement to eliminate the constitutional amendment that was passed a few years ago, that limits the president to 2 terms. Now, I wouldn't do that for myself, but for presidents from here on, it is the only office that is elected by all the people. And it seems to me it's an interference with the people's democratic rights to tell them that they're restricted and cannot vote for someone as often as they want to do that.
Bill Clinton, after surviving impeachment and riding economic prosperity, offered his own twist, suggesting presidents should be allowed to return after a mandatory timeout. 2 times isn't necessarily enough time, he told Rolling Stone magazine, floating a political comeback model that, ironically, Trump would later perfect. Obama approached the taboo topic with characteristic humor. During an interview with comedian Stephen Colbert, he joked about a puppet presidency where he could govern from his basement in sweatpants, feeding lines to a frontman through an earpiece.
If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats, looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. Wow. I'd be fine with that.
But Donald Trump has pushed this constitutional envelope beyond mere academic speculation or late-night comedy. His repeated references to a 3rd term, sometimes framed as jokes, sometimes not, have transformed this theoretical debate into a tangible political question.
26. And I said, well, wait a minute. Under the normal rules, I'll be out in 2024. So we may have to go for an extra term. Okay?
If term limits are supposedly ironclad, how could anyone, Trump or otherwise, possibly serve more than twice? The answer may lie in an obscure corner of presidential history, where the Oval Office has been claimed without a single vote. Not every commander-in-chief earned that title at the ballot box. 8 men have claimed the presidency through the ultimate promotion, when the elected president died. This constitutional peculiarity reveals a stunning truth about American democracy. The presidency can be obtained without winning a single presidential vote. The first such transfer created a constitutional earthquake. In 1840, William Henry Harrison selected John Tyler as his running mate, and together they defeated incumbent Martin Van Buren. At his inauguration, Harrison committed political suicide by action, delivering a 2-hour address in freezing rain without a coat. This fatal display of toughness left him with pneumonia, and he died just 31 days into office. America faced its first presidential succession crisis. The Constitution's language was vague. Should Tyler merely be acting president while Harrison's cabinet maintained control? Chief Justice Taney intervened, declaring Tyler the legitimate president. When Harrison's cabinet attempted to assert authority over the unexpected successor, Tyler delivered a constitutional ultimatum: either accept him as the true president or submit resignations immediately. Tyler's critics mockingly called him his accidency, but his precedent forever changed the meaning of succession. The presidency, it seemed, could be obtained without ever winning a presidential election. Since Tyler's landmark precedent, 7 more men have climbed aboard this constitutional elevator to unexpected power. Vice presidents suddenly thrust into the Oval Office upon the president's death, 3 through illness, but 4 through the explosive violence of assassination. Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy all felled by bullets that simultaneously promoted their seconds in command. This succession mechanism, having the vice president instantly transform into the full president without triggering a special election, injects stability into our system precisely when chaos threatens. During national emergencies or periods of collective grief, this seamless transfer ensures the government continues functioning without interruption. Yet this mechanism, straightforward as it seemed when handling death, left a dangerous constitutional void. What happens when a president isn't dead but can't function? The Kennedy assassination exposed these terrifying gaps, even as Johnson smoothly assumed power. That bullet sparked a crisis of imagination that demanded immediate solution. Congress moved to patch these holes in 1965. The 25th Amendment was adopted on February 10, 1967, establishing 4 key provisions. First, it confirmed Tyler's precedent. The vice president becomes president, not merely acting president, upon a president's death. Second, it created a power shuffle mechanism. When the vice presidency sits empty, the president nominates a replacement subject to congressional confirmation. Third, and most intriguing for our term limits puzzle, it established voluntary power transfer. A president could temporarily hand the reins to their VP, then reclaim them at will. Fourth, and perhaps most controversial, it armed Congress with constitutional nerve gas. If the vice president and cabinet majority declare the president unfit, a 2/3 vote in both houses can forcibly remove them from power. A nuclear option never deployed but always lurking. This final provision sparked heated debate during Reagan's 1981 assassination attempt, but never triggered. Reagan's cabinet had drafted a letter invoking the 25th Amendment during the crisis, but ultimately never sent it to Congress as the president recovered. The third provision, however, has become routine. As recently as 2021, Biden surrendered power to Harris for more than an hour during a colonoscopy, proving that temporary power transfers are now as American as succession itself. But here's the constitutional curveball. If presidents can willingly transfer power, and if vice presidents can become presidents without direct election, aren't we just one clever resignation sequence away from term limit loopholes?
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
When Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew sought re-election in 1972, they were determined to win at all costs.
I simply said, Mr. President, I'm delighted to have the chance to serve again with you, and I'll do everything I can to see that we're reelected.
Mr. Vice President.
Their campaign employed questionable tactics that would later be revealed during the Watergate scandal. Before Watergate fully erupted, Vice President Spiro Agnew was caught in a separate corruption scandal. Agnew had accepted bribes during his time as governor of Maryland and continued this practice as vice president.
I'm not the kind of person who goes into politics purely from a point of his own interest in holding elective office.
Facing mounting evidence, Agnew pleaded no contest to tax evasion and resigned from office in October 1973. This unexpected vacancy led Nixon to appoint Gerald Ford as vice president. Ford was a well-respected congressman from Michigan who had served as House Minority Leader but had never run on a national ticket. He was the first person to become vice president through the 25th Amendment rather than through election. Meanwhile, the Watergate scandal was intensifying. What began as a third-rate burglary at Democratic National Committee headquarters grew into a constitutional crisis as investigations revealed Nixon's involvement in the cover-up. Congressional hearings captivated the nation and threatened to tear the country apart along partisan lines. As evidence mounted, it became clear that Nixon would face impeachment and likely removal from office if he didn't step down. On August 9, 1974, Nixon became the first U.S. president to resign. In that moment, Gerald Ford made unprecedented history. He became the only American ever to serve as both vice president and president without winning a single national election for either office. This unique constitutional sequence would later serve as a case study in how the presidency could be attained through entirely legal means without ever facing voters in a presidential or vice presidential election. The constitutional dominoes had fallen in perfect sequence: a resignation, an appointment, another resignation. And suddenly, America had a commander-in-chief who no American had ever voted for in that capacity. In the end, all that stood between Ford and the presidency were two simple sentences of resignation.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
I'm a firm believer that President Trump will run and win again in 2028. So I've already endorsed President Trump. A man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
You know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
The 22nd Amendment's deceptively simple language, "No person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice," hides a constitutional riddle. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't prohibit serving more than 2 terms, only being elected to them more than twice. This single oversight opens a Pandora's box of theoretical paths to power. If the president resigns or dies, the vice president becomes president. There are no term limits for vice president. So, legally, Trump could run as vice president under a different presidential candidate. If that president resigns or is unable to serve, Trump would ascend to the presidency through a constitutional side door, but only elected twice to the office. But what happens if the new president resigns or dies before a new vice president is confirmed by Congress? The 25th Amendment and the 1947 Order of Succession for the presidency provides a mechanism. After the vice president, the Speaker of the House will become president. And after the Speaker of the House, the President pro tempore of the Senate will become president. While these succession mechanisms exist to ensure governmental continuity, using them to circumvent term limits would be profoundly undemocratic. However, let's explore how the constitutional chessboard could theoretically be manipulated. The Speaker of the House is elected by the members of the House of Representatives. Although no speaker has ever been someone who wasn't a member of Congress, the House can, theoretically, elect any American to be speaker, including a former 2-term president. The same goes for the president pro tempore of the Senate. Customarily, the longest currently serving senator of the majority party is elected as the president pro tempore, but the Senate could theoretically elect anyone for this position. But what if the offices of president, vice president, speaker, and president pro tempore are all vacant? Who becomes president? In this extreme scenario, law provides a domino effect through the president's cabinet, starting with the Secretary of State, down to the Secretary of Homeland Security. These mechanisms were designed to ensure governmental continuity in catastrophic scenarios, not to provide alternative paths to power. However, a former 2-term president could legally serve as Secretary of State or another cabinet position for a future president. If the correct resignation sequence occurred, a former president could once again find themselves in the Oval Office without ever facing an election. These scenarios remain deeply problematic from a democratic perspective. The 22nd Amendment exists to prevent the concentration of power and ensure regular democratic renewal, core principles of American governance. Using constitutional technicalities to circumvent these democratic values would undermine the very foundations of our system. As Trump continues to tease the possibility of a 3rd term, these constitutional ambiguities transform from academic curiosities to genuine questions.
We're going to have to extend my 2nd term because 2026, I'm going to have to extend it for a couple of years. I don't think any of you would have a problem with that.
Trump has repeatedly made comments about running again or extending his presidency, leading to speculation about whether he's serious or merely joking.
As Pope. Do you have anyone
as Pope?
Yeah.
I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number 1 choice.
Whether he's kidding or not matters less than this. Constitutional loopholes exist. Steve Bannon has suggested that there are possible paths to the presidency outside the normal order. While all these scenarios are unlikely, any attempt to circumvent the spirit of the 22nd Amendment would likely head to the Supreme Court. Depending on how they interpret the 22nd Amendment and the Constitution, it is not entirely inconceivable that once again in American history, a person who is not elected by the American people for the presidency finds themselves in the Oval Office. The real question isn't whether someone could theoretically navigate these constitutional loopholes. It's whether doing so would be a betrayal of the democratic principles that the 22nd Amendment was created to protect. As we've seen throughout history, from Tyler's seizure of full presidential power to Ford's unique path to the Oval Office, the Constitution contains more flexibility than meets the eye. The challenge lies in preserving both constitutional legality and democratic legitimacy. History shows us the Constitution harbors unexpected possibilities, but the fundamental issue remains whether anyone would be bold enough to try.
There are really people out there who think I'm not leaving. Can you believe it? Hey, maybe that is a good idea. Let's think about it.